hope you guys have been well. I had my own plans for this episode, but as I started to prepare for the episode, I felt like God was leading me in a completely different direction than what I originally had in mind. And I really felt like He wanted me to share a dream that I had 2 years ago. So that's what this episode is going to be. It's going to be centered around this dream, but not only the dream, lessons that I've learned from the dream, and just ways to access Him. So, in this particular dream, I remember being in a very large, tall building, and I was in the building with a couple of people, a number of people that I knew were familiar, even though right now I couldn't tell you who and who was in the dream with me. I just knew that they were familiar faces, and they were eating and drinking and, celebrating and having a good time, so to say. And I remember being in the dream and looking at them like, do you not feel like, do you not feel this building about to come down? I knew in the dream that the building was about to collapse. And I also knew that I knew because I had been in a similar structure that had shaken and had come down. So I kind of was able to tell what was about to happen, although everybody around me didn't seem to be aware. So then I started to, in the dream, first, I remember picking up my purse and looking for my passport and taking my passport and putting it in my purse. I knew that that was going to be the most secure place for my passport. And then the next thing I did was that I went under the bed. And as soon as I went under the bed, I felt the building start to shake. And then it started to, as it was collapsing, I woke up. And so when I woke up, I asked God, what He was showing me. And He started to say to me that there was an imminent shaking, coming up. And I had this dream in 2022, very early on, I think January, February. And He said that there was a shaking coming to, lives, because whenever you're dreaming and you're dreaming of buildings, it's usually representative of your life. At least in a lot of my dreams, it's representative of lives, of people's lives, basically. And He was saying that there was a shaking coming to many people's lives, and in the dream it was familiar people. So it was going to be people that were I would see around me, and it would be almost out of nowhere, in a sense, because people were kind of just going about life as usual. But then this majestic structure that we were all in, was coming down, and they didn't even see it coming. They didn't know that this is what was happening. And so He was showing me that there was going to be a pulling down of many majestic lives, many people that you would look at and think, oh, they're established. They, everything looks good. Everything seems to be put together. I would be seeing a lot of these majestic buildings, these majestic lives start to topple down, start to come down. And He said to me that there are two important elements in any time of shaking, and that's in one, knowing where to secure your identity in, and two, knowing where to find refuge. In the dream, me looking for my passport symbolizing my identification, my identity, me looking for my passport and finding a secure place to put it was the first element that He said pay attention to. And then the second one was in me crouching and going under the bed to find refuge. And He said, when we find our identity in Him, one, and then we find refuge in Him, then we can withstand whatever shaking that comes our way, because he is shaking. He's shaking the entire world. He's shaking creation so that he can show us where the cracks in our foundations are. And when God is shaking, he's usually disrupting our status quo. He's usually he's using that as a tool to reveal to us the cracks in how we identify ourselves, in where we find our identity. He uses it to expose the cracks in our safety nets. And the magnitude to which our life crumbles is directly related to how solid or how not solid our foundation is. I remember that in the dream, I recognized that I was able to recognize the shaking because I had been in some type of shaking before. And that is the case. When I speak about process, when I spoke about process in the introduction video, that process involved a shaking. It involved God dismantling, disrupting life as I knew it. He was throwing a wrench in so many things that I thought were fine, with friendships, with relationships, with just the way that I had done things before. My process for me was him removing every and anything that seemed good, but was not necessarily him, was not necessarily God. And it was tough. It was tough. But what it has done is that it has left me with a certain type of stability and certainty about me that does not come apart from him, because he took everything else. He removed everything else, and all that was left was me and him. And that's usually his goal when he permits a shaking, a dismantling in our lives, right? And the more I've journeyed with him, it has come with the understanding and the knowledge of how frail I am without him, outside of him. And it has created such a deep need for his help. So that's what this conversation is going to be centered around, is knowing what to do with this type of vulnerability, that comes on the heels of God shaking and disrupting everything in our lives, right? In your life. I know for me, I naturally just started to flow towards him. I remember sitting at my desk at work crying, and I will have an episode of, the start of my wilderness process and just what that looked like for me. But at the onset, I remember just sitting at my desk and I said to him, listen, what do you want from me? When everything that I thought that I had held dear failed me, people failed me, and continue to fail me, really. That is one of the areas that I have been severely, severely shaken in. I remember sitting and I'm just asking him, what do you want? Here is my life. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I clearly cannot figure this thing out on my own. I need your help. I need you to tell me what you have for me. I need you to tell me what your plans are for me. I found myself in such a, vulnerable place because no one else could help me. The people that I had trusted failed me. And so my only option, that space of things and people failing me necessitated it, that it was like God was the only place to turn to, But that was the best thing. And that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to come to him bare, completely just done with me and everyone else. you know? And even till now, I show up completely bare with my pain, with my bitterness, and with my anger, and with whatever it is that is being stirred up in my heart, whatever he's allowing to be stirred up, because that's another thing that he does with shakings. He allows these things, these yucky things in our hearts to be stirred up so that we can come lay it honestly before him. And I've learned to do that. I've learned to, whenever I have something that's not going the way that I would like, something that's not falling through. Whenever I would have a moment where things just did not look or respond or things were not how I envisioned that they would be, I will take everything and I would lay it at his feet, and he would hold that space for me. I know that I can go and be vulnerable and be honest and know that I can be safe with him. And as I prepared for this episode, it hit me that there was, or there is, a correlation between being able to be vulnerable and being able to access God's refuge. Here's what I mean. We think of it as automatic. We read all these scriptures about how God is our safe space and he's our refuge, and all of that. I can't think of any one specific scripture at this moment, but we think that it's automatic, right? And I was thinking about it the other day. We think that, okay, well, yeah, he's my refuge. It's automatic, right? He's covering. And it's not. It really isn't automatic. And think of it this way, or I think of it this way. When you think about a war and you're dealing with the upheaval of, everything that's happening within a war, say you're running and you're looking for a safe space, and there's a structure that's a fortress, and you know that it's solid and it's safe, and you can go in to get covering from all that's happening. You have a choice. You can, it's what it is. Its function remains. With whether or not you're present, that structure functions as what it functions at. It was built to be what it is. Now, unless you choose to go into that function, unless you choose to go into that fortress, into that building to gain safety, you cannot access what it was built to do. If you choose to run around and try to figure things out on your own, then that's what you will deal with. You would have to deal with the upheaval around you on your own. If you choose to recognize that you cannot protect yourself in all the upheaval, and you choose to walk into this structure, then you stand the chance to benefit of what this structure was created to do. It's the same thing with God. He is our fortress. He is our refuge. He is all of these things. He is strong. He's stable. He is who we can run into. And yet, unless we go low enough to recognize that we cannot solve our own issues, we cannot figure it out on our own, and we go to him, we cannot access what is already there. We cannot access who he is if we think that we can figure it out on our own. He is who he is. He is strong, he's stable, he is the fortress, he's all of these things. The benefit that he is there's no changing it. But vulnerability is the key that allows us to go low enough to be able to access the benefits of this strong place, this fortress, this place that is a refuge. So you see, it's not automatic. It requires a choice from us. It requires us being willing to say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I really need your covering. I really need your help. And so accessing God And, being vulnerable before him requires humility. It requires humility, and humility basically allows us to look at ourselves and know that we are not our own gods. Humility allows us to put what we think we know to the side, who we think we know, our own wisdoms, our own thoughts, what we think we've achieved, put it to the side. Because when we're able to do that, then we can truly look to God for help. That is what's absolutely necessary to be able to access God and truly find refuge in Him. It's so interesting. I never really, I knew that, yes, okay, in the dream, I was going low to, access refuge under the bed, to find protection under the bed. But now, or, as I was preparing, I saw this whole thing about going low and being humble, being modeled even as I went low to go under the bed. Again, it's this whole thing of like, to be able to find refuge, to be able to access refuge, we need to be able to go low. It was very interesting to me that was the symbolism that he used. It was going under the bed, which requires someone to come down to then be able to find protection. And that's what's necessary in this time, even as we see shakings left, right, and center, and we're seeing people's lives in upheaval. It's a humbling process, because that's usually where we finally look up and find God. That's usually what allows us to, look to God in His Word. And forgive me, I'll try to add the exact scripture. He talks about how He exalts those who humble themselves before Him. And that process of exalting it's not just relegated to promotion, and promotion as we know it, meaning, oh, you'll be placed in the top positions, and although that's part of it, exalting too, I looked it up, and one of the synonyms is also a lifting up, and so when we are able to humble ourselves before Him and go low and be honest and be vulnerable with Him, He's then able to lift our countenance, lift our eyes, lift our hearts, lift our souls, lift our emotions. This is what exalting looks like too, as well. When we, again, with the key of being vulnerable, and to be able to be vulnerable, it requires the quality of humility, to be able to humble ourselves before Him. This is the key to be able to access Him in this time, which is a very necessary key to have. I believe He was really pushing for this episode now, in this time, because the world needs Him. People's lives are people's lives are being upended left, right, and center. We're seeing people who held high positions and who thought that they could hold certain positions and do certain things without consequence, being brought down. Their lives are being upended in their eyes, both on a large scale and on a small scale. Both, like in my dream, whether it's with the people, around us, people that we know, or people that we see and that we're familiar with, but who are, people that we may have looked up to before. We're seeing people's lives being turned upside down. And God has the answers. But very often, because as human beings, we're so stubborn, we have to fail ourselves. Our connections have to fail us. Our Our own wisdom has to fail us. What we think we know has to fail us. Our own choices have to fail us for us to finally come to that humbled place. That place where we're like, oh, no, I really don't know what's happening. I really don't know what I thought I know. I don't know. The people that I had esteemed, that I thought could lift me up, no longer serve any purpose. They're almost useless right now. We usually have to, as people, as human beings, come to this place for us to finally look to God and know that that is really where the only answer lies. I think of the son in Luke 15, the son who decided that being in his father's presence was just, it was beneath him, and that he needed to go and do his own thing and live his own life. And he did. And for a season, he lived recklessly, and it seemed to be working. He seemed to be good. Reckless in his choices, reckless in how he was living, until it all just came to a head. And in many ways, he went through a series of shaking. He went through, this upheaval that I speak of, where everything, he had wasted his resources. The people around him, it said there was a point where it said nobody could help him. And he found himself in a state of hunger and lack. He had nothing. Everything that he thought that he had secured for himself. I'm sure the people that he was hobnobbing with and he was rubbing shoulders with and he was living life crazily and carelessly with, nowhere to be found. And even if they were there, they really could do nothing for him. And so it wasn't until he found himself in this place of having nothing, low, so low that even as a Jewish boy, he was tempted to roll around with the pigs and eat with the pigs. This was this space of lowness that caused him to finally look in the direction of his father. It says it was at that point that he came to his senses. This was the necessary shaking, the necessary upheaval. This was the situation that brought him so low that caused him to come to his senses. That he then looked in the direction of his father's house. He then realized that whatever he thought that he was looking for, that was where he was going to find it. That being under his father's covering, being in his father's presence, being in his father's home, that was where refuge was for him. But he had to fail. His father let him go and do his thing. He had to fail himself. His choices had to fail him. The people that he esteemed had to fail him. These things had to happen for him to recognize that his father was the one who had all the answers after all. So like this prodigal son, the son in the story in Luke 15, I believe that on the heel of the shaking that's happening right now in many people's lives and is set to continue to happen, that people are being made aware of how much they need God now more than ever. And I believe that I'm to reiterate in this episode that he's just waiting. He's just waiting, just like in the story where the father was waiting from afar with his arms wide open for his son to come back. He is waiting. He's allowing a lot of things to become upended in people's lives because he knows that that's what will get people's attention. But he's waiting. He's waiting. He has the answers. He is near, always has been calling, and just ready to provide the healing, the covering, the restoration, the safety that's needed in this time. But, accessing him really requires just vulnerability, requires truthfulness, honesty, transparency, and the courage to just be able to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a mess. I'm a mess. I do not know what I'm doing. I don't have it together. Father, I need your help. And I assure you, he will absolutely help you if you come to him, you know? So yeah, that's it for this episode. I really hope you guys understood what I was communicating. I felt like I didn't really explain things as well as I could have, or maybe that's just in my head. I don't know. Who knows? All I know is that I came, I put it out there, and I trust that the Holy Spirit will make it understandable to the one person who needs to have heard all of what I shared in this video. So thank you again for listening this far. I'm Kelechi with Talks with Kay, and I hope to see you all next time.